The anime starts with a young man playing various video games. While playing one, he suddenly gets transported into the game's world, where the character Ato, which he had been controlling, appears to him, surprising him. Ato confirms she is real, and he finds out the game he was playing from his sickbed is a simulation of ruling nations, set in the dark world of Fantaria. Ato was his favorite character, and she starts talking about the king, making him wonder, is he playing the king's role? He thought she meant the leader of Minogura, but Ato clarified she meant King Takto, who achieved many milestones on the nightmare difficulty level. He did this using the civilization, said to be the hardest to control, the Desolation civilization. He was the first player and proudly topped the user rankings. Takto was shocked and wondered how Ato knew this, but she remembered everything, including everything he asked her to do in the game. They had invaded the world many times and lost repeatedly, so there was no need to worry. Takto told her that he copied her playstyle because he wanted to be as strong as her, and he was happy talking to her now. Ato felt the same great feeling. Then Takto looked up at the sky, amazed by its shape. He asked if she had summoned him here, but she hadn't. They quickly realized this wasn't the sky, but that they were in the world of the Eternal Nations, a place unfamiliar to Takto. Ato wondered if this was called a miracle, and she approached, expressing how much she loved the moment they met. She asked if they could start over, but Takto didn't know where they were. Ato thought it might be her world or a completely different one. Then she suggested, like before, that they start fresh together and build a kingdom. Takto was shocked and didn't know what was happening to him, but he agreed to Ato's suggestion to start as they had before. He asked her to build their civilization a kingdom for both of them, making Ato happy. Then she introduced herself as Ato the Protector, a child born from the Guardians destined to destroy the world. She assured him that from that moment on, her mind was under King Takto's command. She asked him to descend to the lowest ranks, and Takto felt excited, telling her their civilization was the most wicked ever. Takto asked, "So, you know what Minogura must do first, right?" Then they decided to retire from the world and close their doors to outsiders. After that, Takto summoned a scouting animal, but they both felt disgusted by its appearance. Takto sensed their Minogura civilization was ancient and ruled by evil and ruin, and they should always remember that before making wrong moves. Ato believed they should be cautious about being discovered by others, which was a strict rule in the early game stages. Then Takto told the scouting insect to launch and explore everything nearby, and Ato warned it that if it disappointed King Takto, it must complete its mission. The insect sped off, but Ato felt uneasy because it resembled a servant carrying out orders. Takto realized he could share the insect's field of vision, just like in the game, but it was costly. He would need 100 magic energy points, and they only had 100 left. Building a settlement to serve as their base would require 20 points. Ato thought the cost was high and warned against wasting too much energy. Takto then suggested creating a warrior to fight for them, but with limited magic energy, that wasn't an option. Ato gratefully promised to fight seriously if necessary. Takto noticed that Ato would grow stronger over time, but her current level was 3, meaning Minogura's situation was quite risky, and any battle could lead to their destruction. Ato urged him to smile a little. Meanwhile, the insect continued exploring, and Takto followed it. Through that, he mapped the surrounding terrain and saw it was forested, but they hadn't encountered any monsters yet. Ato guessed the forest would be a good hiding spot for monsters, but found it strange none had appeared. Since Takto didn't see what he thought might be food sources, he decided to keep exploring for a while. Ato felt she wasn't much help and apologized, but Takto said it didn't matter. He was happy she was by his side. Ato was surprised by his words and moved closer, touched by what he said. Suddenly, a group of dark elves appeared near them. It was a large group. Ato thought they were in a fantasy world, where dark elves are usually neutral but tend toward evil neutrality. So, they felt somewhat reassured. Takto asked Ato if she thought this was the Eternal Nations world because if they found another settlement for their civilization, it would be bad. They considered the consequences of war and hoped to avoid it as much as possible. They saw the need to hide at first. Ato thought neighboring another civilization would be very annoying. She suggested that if it was confirmed, they should flee. Takto agreed since Minogura valued peace and harmony above all, and Ato believed war brought out barbarity in any case. Then Takto decided they would watch the Dark Elves to gather info about the area. If luck wasn't on their side, they'd escape, and Ato agreed. More Dark Elves appeared, surprising everyone. The scene triggered a memory of when they had wandered these elves in the forest, led by their chief, Gia. After being expelled from their lands, they had no place to go, and their children couldn't survive. Gia thought the forest was full of plants, and there must be food. But Emily knew there was a cursed forest nearby, on the edge of the unknown land of Idroja. She recalled sealing something in that land, and believed no thriving life was there. Gia thought that was superstition because the trees grew well and urged her not to give up. He told himself not to give up either because his people awaited him, and he couldn't leave until he met Ato and Takto. Back in the present, Takto seemed to him like a great force of evil, making him deeply afraid for his people and soldiers. He couldn't afford to make any wrong decisions. Gia came forward and knelt before Takto, introducing himself himself as the chief warrior of the Mazaram clan of the elves. Gia apologized to Takto for entering the king's forest without permission. Otto thought it was good that Gia apologized, as he had intruded on their land without permission. She asked him why he did it. Gia told her that his clan used to live in the central lands of Idaragia. As he spoke, he felt relieved that they understood his situation, but she became angry and told him to get straight to the point. Gia told her that they had been driven from their land and had nowhere else to go. He thought to himself that it was wrong to want to sugarcoat the truth. Then, Takto asked Gia if their bodies were frail. Gia was shocked by the question, but replied that the persecution had been very violent. He said they came to this land fleeing injustice because they ran out of food on the way, and were also trying to evade their pursuers. They couldn't get more food and hadn't eaten in a long time. Gia felt they didn't deserve all this trouble, and that the tribulation wasn't their right. All they wanted was to live peacefully in a place of their own. Then Takto offered them apples, which surprised Gia. Takto told them these apples were theirs and asked if he knew their taste. Gia replied that he had never seen them before and that their fruit was strange to him. He thought it was rude to eat in front of him without sharing anything. But the rest of Gia's soldiers ate the apples immediately and loved them. Takto showed them apples of a different color, and Edo thought Gia should thank Takto for being generous with them. Gia pleaded with Takto, telling him that there were hungry children and elders among them who hadn't eaten either. He said they could become skin and bones, and he wanted to take some of the apples for the rest of his people, wishing to offer them instead of eating alone. This made Takto sympathetic, and he offered Gia a lot of different food, which amazed Gia. He told himself that they were the elves who fled the light, which is why they are called dark elves, and that they live thanks to the light elves, forced to live in darkness away from the light. No one had ever extended a helping hand to them, but Takto offered them food and told them it was theirs now. The elf soldiers thanked Takto, and Gia asked for the king's name, but he didn't answer. Then we moved to where the rest of the dark elves were, where a very sick lady was. Her daughter told her that Gia, their chief, would come with food now. She was very sad for her mother. When they smelled food nearby, it caught everyone's attention. Then Gia appeared and told them he had brought a lot of food and asked them to get ready to prepare it. The young and old were fed and became very happy. One of the elves asked Gia where he got this food. He told her he found it somewhere, and Takto remembered that memory. Then the elves went to sleep while Gia stayed awake alone. Then the elder Moltar came to him, and Moltar told Gia that the food he brought was amazing, and he had never seen anything like it in his life. Gia had the same opinion because he tasted the food. Moltar asked Gia what happened. Gia told him he encountered mythical creatures deep in the forest. Moltar asked what kind of myths. Gia wondered if Emily had told him anything about a being that was sealed in the cursed lands. Moltar inquired if he had met the King of Ruin. He told him about some legends and ancient books, that when the world reaches saturation, the King of Ruin will appear, bringing chaos to everything and forcing people to start life anew. But he didn't know how true these stories were, but he realized they couldn't be lies. Gia asked Moltar if he was describing himself as this, but Takto didn't introduce himself to him, but he was terrifying enough to earn the title of King of Ruin. Moltar asked if he talked to this king, but Gia told him it was beyond their understanding, but there was a young woman serving him. She explained some of the king's words to them, but Moltar didn't think this was the King of Ruin, but he also wasn't a benevolent being at all. After his stomach was full and he regained some of his magical energy, it became clear to him that this forest was unnatural, and he should have paid attention to that. Moltar asked Gia if he had offered anything in return for the food to the king. When Moltar learned that Gia had offered nothing, he didn't feel comfortable. Moltar criticized Gia, saying it was not normal for an evil being to give gifts for free, but all Gia did was explain what they had been through when asked. Moltar wondered why someone like the King of Ruin would do this. Gia guessed he did it out of mercy and sympathy for their situation. The king overwhelmed them with his generosity, which angered Moltar because he had bowed to him and become his follower. But Gia denied it, and Moltar asked him why he knelt to him. He told him that this expression shows respect. But Gia felt that the king had helped them and offered them aid when they were starving. Moltar expressed his doubts, considering him an evil being, but Gia had no other choice, and they believed they could argue now because their stomachs were full, and the king had provided them with food that satisfied their hunger. Then Gia felt let down and asked him what he should have done, but Moltar had no answer for him and apologized for it, affirming that he had done everything he could. Moltar, as the leader of the Dark Elves, would now negotiate with the king, and he had lived for over 2 centuries. It was natural for him to find a solution to this, and he was waiting for the day he would live in peace. So he asked Gia when that day would come. Then we moved to Takto, where Atto asked him to sit up straight. She asked him how he could spend such rare magical energy on something like this, but Takto felt pity for them, which angered Atto, because they had already started establishing Mainogura and were still ignorant of what surrounded them. He apologized to Ado for using magical energy without her knowledge, and promised that next time he would ask her before doing this, and asked her not to be angry, but she denied being angry. Then Takto told her he would grant any request she made, which surprised Atto, and she saw no need to make such a promise. Takto told Atto that he needed her, and he apologized for opposing her wise decision. He asked her to issue orders as she wished. However, Atto told him that he couldn't speak with the elves smoothly. While he spoke with her very easily, words failed to come out when he stood before others. Atto thought he was playing the role of a strict leader who disdains long speeches and leaves detailed negotiations to his followers. Takto realized he was bad at communication and cried, which saddened Ado greatly, and she asked him to stop crying. Moltar suggested that revealing the food to the elves would bring ruin and make everyone start over. He asked Gia if he was ready to meet this king again, unsure of what they would ask in return for the charity they had given them. However, Gia was confident that he hadn't spoken about such things. Still, Moltar asked Gia if he was certain about something like that, reminding him that it's common for an evil being to demand compensation. But it was also true that they needed to borrow the king's power to survive. Gia believed that even if they left the forest, they would return to a life of homelessness and struggle to find food, which would lead to their end. Moltar thought they had come here to live in a world free from oppression, but this might be their last chance. He urged them to go see the king because the future of their people depended on it. They were being watched by the insect belonging to Taktu, and then we shift to Taktu's place. The insect flew to them to deliver news, but Atu was in conversation with Taktu for a while. Taktu ordered the insect to relay the message to them, and once the insect informed Taktu of the situation, he understood that the elves were on their way to him. Atu thought they were coming because of the food he had given them yesterday, and that it should not be given all at once. However, Taktu anticipated that the presence of people with different ideas and cultures could lead to conflicts, and he wanted to take the rest of the food and leave immediately. Atu asked Taktu if he was worried about anything. Taktu was concerned that he didn't want to negotiate or communicate, which is why he wasn't good at negotiations. Then Atu offered to handle the negotiations for him, which would make Taktu appear as a beloved king. Taktu was grateful for this and asked her if she was sure about it. Atu pledged her loyalty and offered her service if he ever needed anything, thinking that he saw her as unqualified for this task. But that wasn't the issue for Taktu. He relied heavily on her, which made Atu happy. Then Moltari and Gia approached Taktu, starting to thank him for the food. Moltar introduced himself to Taktu, and Atu noticed that Moltar showed respect as he should have. She then asked him what he wanted to say. Moltar asked Taktu's name to get to know him better, which annoyed Atu, but Taktu agreed and told them he was the Lord of the World, the ruler of ruin, Ira Taktu. Atu warned him to always refer to him as King Taktu, which greatly surprised Moltare. Then Atu introduced herself, stating that she was of lower rank than King Taktu, but that they should be careful to show her respect while speaking with her. Moltar then promised them that he would inscribe their names into the souls of their people. Taktu felt relieved that things were going well. Atu allowed them to take the food and leave since most of the food wouldn't last long anyway, which surprised Gia and Moltar. But Moltar asked how they could repay Prince Taktu. Atu thought that wasn't necessary and doubted that they could do anything like that or offer something that would please the king, since they also lacked the necessary resources. Moltar was about to speak, but Atu didn't give him a chance. She thought this was a hesitant situation and asked them if they planned to do something. Moltar denied it, but Taktu sensed that things were moving in a particular direction and asked Atu to discuss the negotiations, whispering to her everything he wanted. This angered Atu because they were terrible at negotiating, and she felt that she shouldn't leave them like this and let them waste this opportunity. However, Taktu was confident that they wanted to build a mutually beneficial relationship, which surprised Atu, but Taktu suggested accepting a price that would be satisfactory for them rather than offering help with nothing in return, which would make them feel more secure. Then Atu told the elves that Taktu was determined to accept their offer in exchange for the kindness he had previously shown them. Moltar informed him that they were grateful to him, and Taktu sensed that Moltar was worried about a trick since they sided with evil. Atu understood that the elves viewed the king as a creature of darkness, but the elves denied this. Then Atu began to ponder what the counter-offer would be, and turned to Taktu because she didn't know what to do. He asked her to tell them about the outside world in the forest, and Moltar agreed, saying he would show them everything he had seen and heard. Then Atu asked them to leave the forest and respect their oath, which caused Gia to shudder upon hearing this. Taktu anticipated Gia's reactions would be much easier than Moltare's. However, Moltar told them that what would make them happiest was staying in the forest beside the king. But Atu informed them that this was forbidden, especially if they wanted to protect the souls of the rest of their clan. She advised them not to mention what had happened now to anyone else, which angered Gia, but Moltar asked him to calm down and follow the king's instructions. Then Moltar thanked Taktu for allowing them to visit him, and they left. Taktu wondered if he was doing the right thing or if he had ostracized them like this. He sensed there was a big opportunity to eliminate them somewhere else, and something needed to be done to turn this situation around. Then he asked them to wait and inquired why they shouldn't become his followers, which surprised them. Atu was shocked and asked them to let her consult the king a little before she approached him angrily, asking him what he was trying to do. Taktu told her he had considered using a refugee system and that the elves were neither inherently good nor evil. If he accepted them as refugees, assuming things unfolded as they did in the game, they should be evil beings like him. But Atu saw that groups of evil beings could coexist, even though they were quite different from the main citizens of Mainogura, who were half-humans. There was still a risk of conflict between them. Taktu anticipated risks indeed, but he asked her to remember how half-humans appeared and if she could bear living with them as citizens. Atu confirmed that it would be difficult to have a normal conversation with these half-humans because of how unpleasant they looked. Therefore, Taktu thought they were compatible and that she would help him a lot if the information reached them. Then Atu informed them that Taktu intended to establish a nation here soon and asked them if they wanted to be its citizens, promising to provide protection for them. Moltaire asked what would happen to them if they became his followers. Atu promised them eternal happiness and then told them they would be considered evil beings, giving them the freedom to choose their fate. She informed them that things would be more enjoyable with them if they wanted her opinion. Then, they moved to walk and explore the forest, and Ato asked Takto to pay attention to his steps. But Takto was fine, and Ato told him that it would take the elves some time to make their 1000th decision to become their followers. Takto thought that anyone else would think about it a lot before turning them into human beings, but Ato told them that they knew from the beginning what the best option for them would be. She told him that their camp was there, that she could see it. When he approached the elves' location, Moltar asked them to kneel before him. When one of the elves looked at him, he lost his promise, and Gia asked that no one look at him directly until Takto sat on the king's chair. Ato told Takto that all the elves were present and announced their acceptance as citizens in their new community, Mainogura. Ato asked Takto if he was sure of this. Takto told her that all the conditions had been met and asked her to officially announce the founding of Mainogura. Then Ato told them that they were now citizens of Mainogura and that their happiness and safety would now be guaranteed under King Takto's wing. But Gia asked himself, "Is this all there is?" They told them they would become evil, but he didn't feel any different. Then he felt the hatred rising within him for those who burned them, oppressed them, and harmed them. Emily also felt this, but Gia's anger increased. Takto approached him and asked him how he was doing. Gia then thought that this was the joy of being under someone's care. Then the elves greeted Takto, crying with joy. After that, Takto discovered that he was stuck because he would start in a bad location on the continent. He was very annoyed and showed the map to Ato, and he was very angry. He told her that there were 2 large nations in the village of Salva, one of which was the kingdom of Qualia. Ato told him that this people belonged to Arlos, which meant that he was a strong supporter of good. The kingdom of Alna, they are elves who love nature, and this is also a supporter of good. Takto thought that if they discovered their evil nation, Ato expected that this issue would be their death now. Takto thought that they did not have the military power to oppose these 2 great nations now. Both of them felt very annoyed. But Takto thought that not all the news was bad. Usually, Mainogura has difficulty producing research. Ato told him that their humanoid citizens were stupid in the end, but it was good that their fertility was high and their happiness did not decrease easily. Takto expected that the elves could cover this weakness. After Ato understood, she heard the elves coming to them to report on the outside world. Then Gia told Takto that he had brought Emily, his assistant, with him because she was a smart woman and had extensive knowledge of myths and other nations. He thought she would be useful to them. Then Ato told them that the king was pleased with their dedication to work and that they would be appointed to key positions to manage the kingdom of Mainogura. This was Takto's irreversible decision, and Moltar would take over the affairs of the state. Since he could use magic, great hopes would be placed on him. Moltar immediately accepted, and Gia would continue to work as a warrior leader and lead the forces of Mainogura. His duties would be to recruit soldiers. Gia accepted the position with pleasure, and they were ready to kill the enemies and make them lifeless corpses, which made Takto feel afraid because war is brutal. Ato told them that the king preferred peace, and asked him to always remember this, wondering why the King of Ruin would be so peaceful. Then Ato asked them to rest well until they recovered because they would be assigned to build housing. Then Moltar told them that he was very grateful, but he was more useful than Gia, who only cared about his strength, and that he had more experience, which annoyed Gia. Gia told the king that he was more energetic than Moltar and that he did not need rest at all, and that Emily would also work hard. But Ato saw that they were obsessed with work and asked Takto if she could ask them to collect resources at the present time, but Takto expected the idea of improving the terrain, and Ato told him that they also had the ability. Then she asked Moltar if they could collect wood, while preserving enough of the forest without harm. Moltar accepted this task because they are a people who live in the shelter of the forest, and if he intended to build buildings using large trees, he was certain that he would fulfill the king's desire. Ato was very optimistic about this, which surprised Gia again because the King of Ruin did not intend to destroy the forest. Then Takto wished them good luck and asked them not to forget to replant the forest again, which amazed the elves. Gia asked what was meant by replanting it. Edo was surprised that he did not know the meaning of replanting the forest. She asked Moltar and Emily, but they did not know. Then Takto discovered that the peoples of this world did not know how to build fortresses through magic technology. Then Otto asked Moltar if he was aware of the terms magic and the 6 main elements, but Moltar was aware of the 4 main elements and that it was a basic concept of magic. Emily had not heard that the term military magic had been used by any other nation. Here, Takto discovered that they were very behind in magic technology. Moltar thought that they were much poorer than their king thought, but Eto thought that they had a chance to overtake other nations once they advanced on them. Then she told them that reforestation is the practice of planting trees after they have been cut down in order to preserve the environment, and that it is an important step to ensure resources. But Emily did not think that any of their magic had anything to do with the growth of trees. Moltar expected that the trees would take a long time and be ready to be cut down, but Atto believed that reforestation is a technology that uses the 4 main elements to accelerate its growth, and this wisdom was born from the great king Takto, which surprised everyone. Takto thought it was a big lie, but Eto continued to tell them that the knowledge that comes from their king covers many different fields and asked them if they knew how lucky they were for this blessing. Emily thought that the apple she had received earlier was food created by the king. Edo confirmed this to her, but she preferred the grapes that the king created. But Emily also liked the grapes, and she found seeds in them and planted them, eagerly awaiting their growth, which amazed Atto and Takto. Atto asked her if she had really planted the grape seeds, and had they already sprouted. Then Takto asked himself why he hadn't thought of it before, and that the delicious food he created before was from the modern world. This meant that he could use emergency production to create things that did not exist in the game. Then he used emergency production and discovered that with this power he could create gunpowder, basic metals, and even oil. But this requires a great deal of magical energy. But this is extremely amazing, and he felt happy. But Emily was afraid that something bad would happen. But Atto told her that the matter was easy for them, and that she had done well, and Mainagura had obtained the 2nd national advantage. Then we moved to one of the 2 kingdoms in the continent. Its princess was playing the piano, and vowed to the cursed forest because the harbinger of the world was coming from there. Then the cardinal came to her and asked her to speed up the preparations because savages had appeared in the northern province. The queen agreed to set out because she should not ignore this. Then we moved to the elves, and they began to plant the seeds in the forest.